Here's Reverend Martin.
All right, Brother Blackwell, let me say good morning or good afternoon, good evening, but never good night, and certainly never goodbye. I hate goodbyes, don't you? My name is Rev Nathaniel W Martin, pastor of the New Life Institutional Baptist Church right here in Los Angeles and Southern California, as some would say. And we're happy to be coming to you with a program episode called It's Time. And what is it time for? Why, it is time for social justice, environmental justice, economic justice, which would include reparations for past wrongs. This country needs to make amends, economic amends for the economic denial of opportunity that has been visited upon black people here in America historically, going all the way back through and including the slave trade. Although if America had been honest and fair just in the 1900s when it developed the Social Security program or the FHA program, which was the Federal Housing Administration at that time, then later in 1968 after the great civil rights movements, it became the Fair Housing Act. But if we had just been true from that shorter period of time, then much of the economic disparities and the wealth gap that we are witnessing and discussing in such surprise and shock here in America would never have happened if everybody had been given the opportunity to purchase property, buy a home at the rates at which only the one segment, the Caucasian segment, as the lending requirements said, were allowed, but the non-Caucasian segments were not. They were closely excluded. Our marching orders come from two portions of Scripture. Deuteronomy chapter 24, beginning at verse 14, and another section of Scripture coming from James chapter 5, beginning one verse really in verse 4. Not to say that the entire Bible, many portions of the Scripture, deal directly with economic inequity, social injustice, oppression, and of course the oppressor. But let us read, because we only have a short minimum of time, and I usually tend to get carried away. It says in Deuteronomy chapter 24 and beginning at verse 14, "Thou shalt not oppress," mark that word oppress, "and hired servant that is poor and needy, whether they be of thy brethren or of thy strangers that are in thy land within thy gates, at their day." That means when they get through working that day, no 40-hour work week. "Thou shalt give them their hire, neither shall the sun go down upon it, for they are poor, and setteth their heart upon it, lest they cry against thee unto the Lord, and it be sin unto thee." What is worse than having you cry out to the Lord because somebody won't pay you what they owe you, and the company will not honor the paycheck or will not honor the contract? You've been a vendor, you've been a independent contractor, as you have been called for tax purposes, and you've done the service or provided the goods, and now the person or the company or the venue or the entity that you have performed the service or rendered the goods for or made the delivery for is what? Reneging. I don't have enough. I don't have it today. Come back tomorrow. Well, the Bible calls that oppression. Oppressing. You are oppressing your brothers and your sisters. You have moved up into the level in the world. God looks upon you as an oppressor. And God has never been on the side of the oppressor, but he has always certainly been ready to help the oppressed. Don't forget, Pharaoh and his army got drowned. Nebuchadnezzar and Belteshazzar armies were kingdoms were pulled down and overthrown. You can't play with justice, because it will catch up with you at the worst of time. And truly, as we have labored to express God's dissatisfaction, God's genuine revulsion, and holding in abomination this practice of societies and of civilizations to defraud or to steal from its citizens. God is never happy with that, and God is never going to endorse that. Remember, the entire Civil War here in America was fought because of what? Job action. Job action. People failed to honor their commitments to pay the people that they had working for them, and it caused a bloody war. Isn't that right? Remember, Abraham Lincoln said, if we shall suppose that slavery, American slavery, is one of those woes that in the process of God's time must needs come, but that he now wills that it come to an end, and he gives to both North and South this terrible war as the woe due for the offense. Shall we discern therein any departure from those attributes which those believers in a God ascribe to him? So you cannot play God cheap and think that just because you have been to school and you've learned some subtle devices where you can do exercise fraud or do fraudulently out of sight, that it is out of God's sight. It may be out of my sight. Sure, I may not recognize what you're doing to me, but God is looking and God is booking, and God will bring the secret things to light. I imagine some of us scoff at such language, but I would counsel you to search the pages of history and look at how many civilizations have been brought to naught because of the fact that they became immoral and became oppressors and oppressive to their citizens who resided and who lived in their states or countries. We have a great immigration situation here in the world today, based upon the fact of the chicanery, the subterfuge, the betrayal of values by the leadership, those in power, failure to live up to the leadership principles, even the minimum of the universal principles of life. And as a result, it has brought about great suffering on huge portions of civilization. And you think God is going to let that slide? No, God's not going to let that slide. God's going to call those actions into account. Remember, the scripture says, whatsoever man soweth, and that is not limited to gender, neither is it limited to merely a species. It is for the entire earth. And it covers nations, it covers corporations, it covers multinationals. It covers your little company, and it also covers the big company. It covers, as they say, the SBA, the Small Business Administration, and it covers the smoke-filled room where the political deals that have economic consequences have been made. We must never forget that the economic situation that we are in is because of political decisions and legislative bills that were passed by others who had power at the time to do right, but they chose to do wrong. And just because you murder someone by proxy doesn't mean that God doesn't know you did it. And our second scripture, before we get too far ahead, is from James chapter 5 and verse 4. And I got it wrote here, but it says, behold the hire of the laborers. Mark that word, the hire, that means the pay of the laborers. Laborers is self-explanatory. Those who have worked, those who have been employed to do something, whether formally or casually, is of no mind. You got to pay people when they work for you. In this case, who have reaped down your field. Farmer got a farm. You got to bring in people to work that farm to get that crop in before the crop spoils, or before the rains come, or before the weather changes. And the people come in, and a lot of time those people don't get paid for the work that they do. Here in America, we used to have a dirty, corrupt system of sharecropping and convict leasing, where poor people would work on somebody else's farm, and the farmer would give them a place to stay in the back house, as they call it. And they bought all of their goods from the farmer. They brought the material to make the dresses from the farmer. They brought their food and then from the farmer. And then in return, they worked that farmer's fields. And they were to get a share of the harvest, or the result of that labor. They call that sharecropping. That the farmer provided the farm and the implements, the tools, plow, the mule, and the like, and the tenant farmers, the sharecroppers, provided the labor. They were poor, they were penniless, a lot of times they were uneducated, and they had to work those fields and bring in that crop with the expectation that the farmer would be fair, and would have integrity, and would have honesty, and would give them a truthful reckoning of how much the crop sold for, how much money you made for selling the bales of cotton at the cotton gin, or the tobacco, or the goobers, or the corn, or the wheat, or whatsoever it was. That you would be a fair reckoning, half and half to the farmer, and the other half to the sharecropper who had actually labored and toiled to bring in that crop. But you know the story right here in America, the greatest country on the face of the earth, according to Don King, the land of the free and the home of the brave, a land of high moral integrity, high ideals. We talked about truth, justice, and the American way. But we find that in America, there was a great deal of downright greed and corruption that was practiced. And consequently, the poor tenant farmer, the sharecropper, always seemed to come out a bale short, a day late and a dollar short. And I wonder why that was. It's because of dishonesty on the part of the owner of the farm. You tell him, well, John, look like we just didn't make it this year. And yet the farmer going out to buying a brand new tractor, brand new Cadillac, sending his kid to Yale. How's that? And you telling me that we didn't make no money this year on the crop. All your clothes is Brooks Brothers, and the poor tenant farmer is wearing clothes from F.W. Woolworth, which is not a reflection on the Woolworths. Thank God they're going out of business. But the dishonesty that was practiced, the Bible calls it fraud and oppression. And those things gall the mind of humanity. Is that right? The human spirit is oppressed and revolts against such treatment, is repelled by injustice. You may not be able to give a formal definition of justice, but you sure know it when you see it, and you recognize it in its absence. And James, even in his day, was speaking out against that type of inequity, which was way back in Jesus' time. But yet way up here in Rev Nathaniel Martin's time, there's still inequity and fraud being practiced. Fraud, I tell you. Fraud. Straight up fraud. We ain't got the money. Government say we don't have the money. Okay, the county, you go to the county official, we want to get a park, or we want to start some project to help young people, and we want to get better schools, better school books. School board say we ain't got the money. But yet you go up yonder to Belmont, they got plenty of money. You come down here to Gompers, Locke, Washington High School, very little money. You go out there in Pacific Palisades, state-of-the-art restroom, state-of-the-art music facility, state-of-the-art cafeteria. You come down here where God's children live, children of a darker hue. I don't want to pick on Lockhart High School. You could go to Horace Mann. Any of the others. What's happening? The schools are dilapidated and deteriorating. The restrooms out of order. Water fountains broken. The kitchen substandard. All of this type of thing. And the school board tell you we ain't got no money. That's fraud. Fraud being practiced against God's people, even today. And mind you, all of us pay taxes. We all pay taxes. You poor, you certainly going to pay taxes. If you're rich, you can get by. But if you poor, you're going to pay the taxes. And if we are paying the taxes, and then there should be an equal distribution of those educational funds, those funds that are earmarked. You go down there on Bowder Street, you go in that building, they got marble hallways, marble restrooms, marble in the offices, and very fine executive desk and all of this type of thing. And they'll tell you, well, we did all this for the children. Nobody benefiting from that but the grown folks that's sitting at those desks who are working to get to the next higher political office, which the Board of Education is just a springboard for them to go on into formal politics, go on up to the assembly, go on up to the legislature. And who's suffering down here is our children. The Bible calls that what it is. It calls it oppression, it calls it fraud. You had the revenue, you had the funds, and but yet you did not equally distribute, and you did not wisely use those funds. And in many ways, those funds have been what? Misused. God knows sometimes they've even been embezzled. Excuse me. But what does God say about that? You see, we don't have to go far. God is looking and booking. God is seeing how the people are being treated. And right here in Los Angeles, I can tell you, the students are not getting a good education. They're getting a bogus education. They're being put in what the social activists call a school to prison pipeline. A lot of the black students, yes, the black students, gifted, many of them, talented, many of them, with the ability to learn if they had a decent teacher that took an interest in them. But instead of being taught, they're pushed into what you call special education. What are you going to learn in special education? You see? And the line was given to that some years ago by a lady in Chicago. I believe her last name was Williams, who took her own money and took a bunch of these kids that had been put in special education, and she started teaching them literature. And the first thing you know, they're reading Shakespeare and explaining Shakespeare. So it's not that the child can't learn, it's that the teacher will not teach. That's fraud. That's oppression, because it sets children up for failure. You don't learn to read, you don't learn to write, you don't learn to do arithmetic by a certain level of age that you have attained to. And you are becoming a candidate for the prison industrial military complex. And a lot of these huge corporations are investing in prisons. You know, they're sending our people away, but let me not get too far off of our subject. Time is running. I wanted to keep us abreast, keep us aware that these inequities still have to be addressed. Just because it's in the Bible, which is written way back there, does not mean that it's not happening way up here. Yes, our governments are defrauding us at the city, county, state, and federal level. Let us not go to the federal level, but because we realize how we are being defrauded daily. They're taking our tax money, and the rich are getting away from paying their share of the tax burden or the tax responsibility, which means more and more of that tax responsibility is being shifted to the people who can bear it the least, the poor, who are the least prepared to pay these additional taxes, fees, permits, and costs that are being shifted more and more from the rich and the super rich and the uber rich now onto the shoulders of the uber poor. And so we have a great transfer of wealth from the poorest to the richest. And you think God's going to let that continue to go? No. Notice it says, the hire of the laborers who have reaped down your fields, which is of you kept back by fraud, crieth, and the cries of them who have reaped. Not just the fact of the cries of who have cried, but the cries of those who have reaped, the people who have worked, and therefore have a legitimate and an honest right to make some noise about the fact that they are not being paid or have not been paid, or they're crying out, and their cries have entered into the ears of the Lord of Sabaoth. And you better watch that, because remember, God told Moses, I have heard the cry of my people, and I am come down to deliver them. Don't think God is not coming. He's looking and he's booking, and he will come to begin to correct these injustices and these inherent wrongs. I've spent a long time on this today because the Spirit said it's important that we not gloss over these injustices that are the daily fare of the poor in America. You're defrauding our young out of an education. You're defrauding our elderly out of medical care and hospitalization, and taking away all of their benefits, and sopping up, soaking up, absorbing all of their meager funds that they get from the government to carry them through their old age. And the average stay in a rest home now is above $6,000 a month. Above $6,000 a month. And if you're middle class, you can't get in the rest home. You got to get rid of everything you got, turn it over to the state, sign it over to the state in order to get in a rest home. Your mind may not be that sharp by that time. So now you got these people who are claim that they're standing up for your best interest, stepping in to represent you in your best interest, telling you that you're feeble-minded, but we got intelligent minds. We've got degrees and BAs and MBAs, and you wind up poor as Job Turkey. You ain't careful. And those things are not just, they're not honest, but they are happening all the time, more and more all across this great nation, across the length and breadth of this country, from sea to shining sea, from the mountains to the prairies. Is that right? To the oceans white with foam. It's nothing but fraud and oppression. And please believe me, God is not pleased with such carrying on. I want to close out by giving a shout out to the young man named Tyler Mitchell. He's a 23-year-old photographer, and because of a black girl named Beyonce, he was commissioned to do the first ever front page, cover page, by an African American that in his 126-year history, of the Vogue magazine, they never had an African American photographer to do that cover. But here, this young 23-year-old boy, youngster, 23 years old, and didn't come up like these, these rich, like these other photographers where you got mentors. No, he didn't have no mentor. He didn't have no portfolio. He had to go out doing filming rap videos or just videoing who would let him video. So, and keeping his name out there. And somehow he came to Beyonce's attention. And she, because of her stature, was able to get him the commission to do the cover for the September issue of Vogue magazine. Boy's name is Tyler Mitchell. We need to encourage him. And I'm sure those dollars are going to encourage him. Got a good mind on him too. He said, we've been victimized, but there's a duality to the images with their appearance. And he says, for so long, black people have been considered things. We've been thought thingified, physically, sexually, emotionally. And he says, with my work, I'm looking to revitalize and elevate the black body. Boy, got a good head on it, good mind on it. I like that. He says, it's funny that you'd imagine someone as famous as Beyonce to be protective of her image, but she was really an open book, and that's exactly what you want as a photographer. It's funny because I'm pretty sure she headlined the first concert I ever went to when I was maybe 8 or 9. So you could say we met in a past life. The resulting images tread the line between reality and fantasy, documentary and portraiture, subtly refracting the glossy light that tends to fall on fashion and celebrity toward a softer, more nuanced feeling. When asked what genre of photography he claims, fashion, documentary, art, for example, Mitchell replies without hesitation, I'm a concerned photographer, social media savvy, politically engaged, and totally fearless. All right, there's a ladder now. It's just a new ladder. I want to open the eyes of the kids younger than me and show them that they can do this too. Remember, first African-American photographer for Vogue, do a cover of Vogue in its 126-year history. And believe me, a whole lot of black women have bought Vogue magazine down through the 126 years. Thank God, he makes a change. He makes a way out of no way. I'm not hopeless. I'm hopeful because I know that there is a God and I serve a true and a living God. I want to encourage all of you young photographers and old photographers likewise, stay in the race, stay in the fight. All our social activists and social justice people, don't give up, stay at it. And as I always say in closing, with all these millions and billions and trillions of dollars around here that's floating around in this world and this country, if they don't want to pay you, don't work for them. God bless you. May God keep you. We're out.